The 7th and final season of Orange is the New Black is now on Netflix, and I'm sad because it's the final season. I've been saying this all week. The show is, of course, based on the New York Times bestseller, Orange is the New Black, My Year in a Woman's Prison.
The memoir was written by Piper Kerman, and she joins us now. Thank you very much for joining us.
Being here.
So Vlad is in mourning, but we're working through it with him.
Yes.
But here's the thing that people might not know about the series: that it's based on your life experience. You spent 13 months in prison, but now this is the 7th season for the series. So how much of what we're seeing is still based on what you experienced?
Well, you know, Jenji Kohan, who is the creator of the Netflix series, I always say that she takes the book, Orange is the New Black, and she puts it in a blender, and she puts a lot of other ingredients in there and presses liquefy. So every single season, there is some setting or situation, some storyline that has something from the book, but she does it in ingenious ways. It does not track, you know, my life. The show is not a biopic, I'm happy to say.
Yeah, because what was really interesting about the show as it progressed from the first season is, I think with the first season, everything was sort of filtered through the lens of the character who plays you, essentially. But then as the seasons, even the first season, but then ultimate subsequent seasons, it moved away from her perspective and brought your perspective of all these other equally fascinating, equally interesting women who all have stories much in the same way that you had a story, but they're just different.
What's brilliant about what Jenji did is that she created a show with so many fascinating female protagonists. And so every single person who watches the show can find one of these incarcerated women who they identify with and who they root for. And that is groundbreaking, and I'm very grateful that the show
we were talking
accomplished that.
yesterday about what the show does is really humanize people who are behind bars. And we talked about our own experiences as reporters, interviewing people who have served time or interviewing people in jail. And the struggle that you have as a reporter to remember that this person is more than just their orange jumpsuit.
Absolutely.
And they had a life before they got there. You talk a little bit about that in your op-ed that you just wrote. It's in the Washington Post. It's called "What's Happening in the Orange is the New Black is Happening to Real Women Behind Bars." And one of the lines that really struck me that I think people don't really think about, I'm going to read it. It says, you know, all of these women are struggling to survive in a system built by and for men. We have talked here about the challenges that particular challenges that women face in prison that are not addressed. And we did a whole conversation about the menstrual cycle and how humiliating it is for women to have to ask for feminine hygiene products, to pay for it themselves. Why did you write this op-ed?
I wrote that op-ed for the very reason you highlight. You know, women have long been the fastest growing part of the criminal justice system. And many folks don't know that there has been, you know, an over 700% increase in the number of women that we're putting in prison. There has not been a 700% increase in women committing crimes. There is not a female crime wave happening. Rather, we are putting women in prison that we would not have put in prison, you know, decades before.
It is the first option.
That's a change in policy. That is not a change in safety in the community. And most women who are incarcerated don't really pose a threat to public safety. So our impulse to put them in prison or jail is punitive and is not about public safety. Once you're in prison or jail, you are absolutely in a situation and a setting which was conceived of by men for men, and it is like a double punishment for many women, whether you're talking about reproductive justice issues like access to feminine products, or equally important or more important, you know, the many women who are pregnant while they're incarcerated and what is going to happen to them and their babies during that period of time. And the show has done a wonderful, wonderful job of dramatizing that and showing not just with babies and pregnancy, but families. The fact that our current criminal justice system is tearing families and communities apart and not making them safer.
I want to highlight something that Dale Soules told us yesterday. She revealed that your charity of choice is Women's Prison Association. What is that association, and why did you choose it?
Well, I sit on the board of the Women's Prison Association, which is based here in New York City. The Women's Prison Association is an amazing organization. It does many things for women and families, including providing safe and stable housing when women are first released, which we know is a huge issue for women all over this country. The Women's Prison Association is one of 8 organizations that are going to benefit from the Pusey Washington Fund, which was created by the show and by the creative forces behind the show. We're asking fans of the show, like perhaps you,
Yes,
Vlad,
yeah.
to donate to the fund, and the funds will all be dispersed equally between these 8 organizations: the Women's Prison Association, an organization in California called A New Way of Life, which also provides housing, the National Council of Formerly Incarcerated Women, which does a lot of policy work, the Immigrant Defense organizations are helping to free migrants, and of course we know that many women and children have been impacted by incarceration of migrant people in this country. And so I just think that that's an amazing way for people who are passionate fans of the show to give back a little and help take care of the real women all over this country who are struggling to change their own stories, just as the characters in the show.
So I just want to point out that you mentioned that it's called a Pusey Washington Fund.
Yep.
So Pusey is a fictional character, but her story was probably one of the most. I mean, watching her arc throughout the course of the series, and I don't want to give too much away if people are still hoping to binge on all 7 seasons, but this was a character who had a life that you would not expect would turn out for her in jail. She was highly educated. She'd grown up in a military family on the show. She spoke multiple languages, but she was also slight and petite and found herself incarcerated in this prison. And I don't want to give too much away about her fate, but ultimately what happens to her is absolutely devastating, and it changed sort of the course direction of the show. And I think it's unique and interesting that this organization has chosen to name it the fund for a fictional character. But it goes back to your point, Piper, that so many of the characters on Orange is the New Black are people that we probably have in our lives that we know. And that's what Pusey was.
Well, everyone knows, I think, that the U.S. incarcerates more of our own people than any other nation in the world, and we've been doing that for decades. And at this point in time, incarceration affects all of us. Either directly and, disproportionately poor people and poor people of color are most harmed by bad policies. But everyone in this country is being affected by mass incarceration, whether they know it or not.
I often say that it's like a 6 degrees of separation thing, because we are incarcerating so many people. Chances are, if you don't have somebody in your family, you will at some point along the way. Somebody. There's some sort of connection.
Yeah, and that's a bad choice on the part of us as a community. That's not just about individual bad choices.
Yeah. Exactly. Wow, it was great talking to you.
So great talking to you. Thank you so much.
For having me.
I'm going to check out that association, and it's just really great to meet you, because you have such a fascinating story. And I know that the show is not all about you, but you were sort of the impetus for it. And I think it's for a lot of people who watch the show. Time Magazine called it one of the most important shows of the decade. So that's certainly due.
For you, I imagine it's great to be part of this successful show. But based on what you read, I would presume that you also hope that the conversation doesn't end when the show goes away.
That's one of the reasons that the Pusey Washington Fund was created, so that fans could continue to engage with these ideas and engage with these organizations that are doing the work every day in communities on the ground. Obviously, the show Orange is the New Black lives on, because it'll be streaming as long as people want to watch it. So we're very happy about that.
Cool.
Awesome.
Piper, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So the 7th and final season of the prison dramedy is now available to stream on Netflix.